Hello, I'm Bob. This is where I live. This is my house. I've lived here for about almost 40 years. And for most of that time, my wife and I have had lots of house plants. We started off a long time ago with a few little tiny pots, and we babied the plants that we had. And then we kind of liked having them. We didn't have any specific reason for having them. They just thought they were kind of pretty. And so then we ended up with approximately 60 as the years went by. And then as we've gotten older, because of how we care for them and all the work that they take, we're down to about maybe 20, 30. There's lots of benefits to having house plants. One would be it's relaxing. You're focused on looking after these living creatures, and you're not thinking about all the stress in life. So that's one great benefit. And another one is that they're beautiful. They beautify our home. And whether other people think, oh, well, they're just too much work to add a little extra beauty to your home or not, there are other benefits to them. Some of them purify the air. They take toxins out of the air. And we have about 3 that I know of that do that specifically. That's why we have those. They also require us to think. And as you age, you lose your memory and you lose your ability to focus. And this helps us. In other words, we maybe even every year, we might even look up, well, how do we look after this plant again? And we look that up on the internet and we think about it and then we do it. So we're researching and we're getting our mind engaged in these creatures. House plants, like the plants outside, give you oxygen. They breathe in the carbon dioxide and then they exhale oxygen, which we all need. And house plants also add humidity, moisture to the air in your house so that you can breathe better. We've had this one since it was a little tot, about a foot off the pot there. And it's probably about 35 years old. And it grows very slowly. It's called a Norfolk Island pine. Now, there's an island in the South Pacific between New Zealand and Australia, and it's called Norfolk Island. And this is where this evergreen originated. It's such a popular plant to have indoors, and if you live in a warmer climate outdoors, that it's world famous. Likes to be misted. So we mist it once a week with a sprayer with some nice warm water. It likes that. It's like you having a shower or something. It just likes that. And the moisture in the soil here has to be damp, but it can't be soaking down there in the roots. Otherwise, it'll rot and die really quickly. You can call it the Norfolk pine or it's the Norfolk Island pine. It's an evergreen and it doesn't lose the needles. If they turn brown, it means that you probably haven't given them enough water. You can cut off the branches if they turn brown, but this has lasted a long, long time. This is another tree, a house plant. It's a tree. It's a Ficus benjamina tree. The leaves are shiny. You can't see it quite like in that context right now because we're kind of in the late afternoon here and the lights aren't too bright in my house because I don't like to have really bright lights. But the leaves are shiny and it sort of droops down and hangs like that. And if this was in, say, Africa, out where in the natural environment, the branches would be dragging on the ground. And it would be a monster tree. I think, though, that the beauty of the way it stands and the twisty branches in the stem make it so wonderful. Now, here's what you have to watch out for. This thing, again, doesn't like bright sunlight. So if it's in the jungle, it's in the canopy because it's so big, and it's also surrounded by tons of other plants to protect it from the direct sunlight. It doesn't like direct sunlight, but it also doesn't like to be moved. So this is where this one sits. So when people come through my front door, they see this, they always see this and they go, what is that? And I say, well, it's a very popular house plant, and it's a ficus weeping fig tree, or a ficus benjamina. I like saying it's a ficus benjamina because it makes me sound like I'm smart. And it needs water too, and it's like the other one. It just needs damp water, but it doesn't like to dry out, and it doesn't like to be sopping wet. It needs, the soil should be damp. So in the winter time, again, this one goes outside. It likes to be outside in the warm weather, in the shade. But in the wintertime, like now, it's getting colder out. It likes to stay here, and I could probably only water it maybe once a month. Give it a little drink because it'll go into hibernation. It'll start to slow down in the way it grows. And again, we've had this a long time. This is a hibiscus. It's a tropical plant. You can see that it's getting flowers. It happens to be red, this particular one that I have here. Red flowers. There's one down in here, just starting, red. It loves sun, and it loves water. In fact, it sits outside in the warmer weather, and I just brought it in the other day. We repotted it in our compost heap out in the yard, put fresh soil in it, washed the roots, washed the branches. We were careful though because it had these flowers on it. And it only flowers when it really is happy. I mean, I've had this for a long time too, and I never saw a flower. I guess it wasn't happy. But this year outside, we got a lot of rain and we got a lot of sunshine, and it was nice and warm. So this thrived, and I didn't have to water it outside at all. But now that it's in, it's thinking, hey, because it's been flowering for the last month. They turn into a beautiful bloom, and then they fall off, and the new one starts up. So it's a hibiscus, and there's different kinds of hibiscus plants, but it's tropical. So if you were to go to a place like Florida or Mexico or the Caribbean or something, you'd see these things everywhere. They just grow wild. If it looks like the leaves are drooping and they're shriveling up, it's saying to you, I need water. Give me more water. So I like to make sure the soil's damp most of the time. That one. This is a spider plant. And it was just a little tiny baby, say 2 years ago. Now look at it. And again, this is another one that I take outside when the weather starts to warm up in late May, and I leave it out there until now, near the end of September, and then it comes back in because it doesn't like cold. It's tropical. It likes to be where it's warm all the time. And it likes indirect light. The cool thing about this, though, is that you see these little babies that are growing on these long, skinny branches? These little babies? These are called puppies. Yeah, puppies. And you can take the puppy, you can just snap off a little bit of it anywhere here, say like there, and stick that in a little bit of dirt, and you'll end up with one of these in about a year from a puppy. So you could give these away as gifts to people. Now here's the deal. The spider plant will really take the toxins out of the air. So if you have a baby or some kids in your house or some old people, wherever they sleep, put a spider plant in the room. And it doesn't, this one's been sitting in this big pot, but I used to have it hanging from one of those macrame things, from the ceiling. From the 70s, I used to macrame, make like pot holders. And then I used to always have spider plants hanging around, especially in the kids' room, or now that I'm old, it can go in the room where I sleep, and this is my bedroom. So with my wife. So this is a spider plant that's maybe, well, I'd say 2 years old at the most. And if you ever see it with these long, huge branches with little puppies on the end, it's happy. And it likes indirect light too, and you water that whenever it needs a drink. So it's kind of dry now. Later on today, I'll give it a little drink. It'll tell you the leaves start to shrivel up, and they change shade. They might get browner looking on the tips and stuff, and you'll never see the puppies hanging at the end of the branches if it's not happy. But that is a spider plant that needs to be in everybody's house. Some of these plants, by the way, are toxic to kids and animals. But we have a cat. We've always had a cat. And the cat doesn't chew on this because the cat knows better. It knows that it's not something you chew on. Although when I let my cat out into the backyard where I have lots of grasses growing, different kinds of grasses, ornamental grasses, it'll chew on certain ones and it won't chew on others because it's chewing on it, the juices especially, to help with its digestive system. Animals are very smart. And I don't know, sometimes I think some animals are smarter than humans, even though we're at the top of the smartness uh, chain. Anyway, so spider plant, you need a spider plant. What did you call this, Sue? A philodendron? This one.
You told me it was called an arrowhead.
Yeah, it's an arrowhead. It's got different names according to, some people call it a horseshoe plant, an arrowhead, horseshoes. I like the word horseshoe because it kind of looks like a horseshoe. The leaves do. But you called it a type of philodendron, right? Yeah, I think that's what she called it. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that it's toxic. Every last part of that thing is toxic. It's poison. Do I have it? Of course I do. Who's going to touch? I can touch it, but I'm going to wash my hands. Even if I touched it and licked my fingers, I might get a little bit sick, but I'm not going to get that sick. Otherwise, I wouldn't have it. But if you ate it, if you chewed on those leaves or put it in your salad, or maybe if you rolled around in it. But anyway, so it's a philodendron. You can see philodendrons like to have all these trails, right? And they climb up they hold on to different things. They got little suction cups on them. They hold on and twist around things. And I've got it sort of out away from the walls and things so that it can just hang on this table. This is just an iron table with a rock from my sister's bush. She lives in the forest. And clay pots. I like to use clay pots. They're more plant friendly than plastic. And of course, it's been outside for the warm part of our season here, and it's back in, and it grew all these things just since June, and it'll grow bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. But it's toxic. But the colors are beautiful, and you can get different shades and different kind of philodendron leaves. If it's a philodendron, it just means it's one of these climbing, crawling vine kind of plants. And yes, you can find that in the Amazon jungle. Many, many, many different varieties of that. So I like it. It just makes a statement there. It's kind of cool. Okay, I'll just move my dog over here. And I'll move my throne. And I'll just sit beside this snake plant. First of all, this snake plant, it's called a snake plant because the leaves look like snake skin. Okay? And it's a sword plant. Some people refer to it as a sword plant because the tips of it are very sharp. You can poke yourself and draw blood from that. And it takes the toxins out of the air. And it's so friggin' easy to look after. Like nothing falls off of it. You just give it some water when it feels like it needs some water. But it's so easy to look after. And it grows really quickly. Okay? That's why I've got this one. I got another one upstairs and another one in another room. And they're all about this size. You can see that this is jam-packed. It's filling up the pot. So it's kind of pot bound. It likes to be snug. And if there was only a few of these in this big pot, it would probably die. It likes buddies around. Lots of snakes around it. And so the pot needs to be really, if you're putting your snake plant in a pot and you've only got so many, make sure it's really almost stuck in there with not too much dirt. It likes light. It likes lots of light. And I have pretty good windows in this house, but sometimes the sun comes up over here in the east and then it goes around, to the south and then to the west. So this thing, could probably use a better spot in the house where there's more light, but it's just too heavy. but I didn't repot it, and it's doing fine. It's a giant. It'll grow right up to the ceiling, and it lives a long, long time. So easy to care for. You don't have to do much to it, except it's heavy. I only showed you about 4 or 5 plants, and we have about maybe 20, 30. And remember, we used to have 60. Uh, they're like anything. They're like a pet. They're like a child. They're like a house. They're like a car. They're like anything, clothing. You have to look after them. And these are alive. Plants are alive, and they do the oxygen thing. If we didn't have plants, we wouldn't be on the earth because there'd be no oxygen. And so I encourage you to get yourself maybe a snake plant, maybe a Ficus benjamina fig tree, and maybe one of those Norfolk Island pines that are so Christmassy like. Get those 3 at least, and a spider plant. Get those and put them in your home. That's a good start. And look after them. And they only need to be babied once a year or outside someplace where you can wash them and spray them and change the soil and make sure they're comfortable in the pot, and then care for them throughout the year. If you keep them in your house and it's cold outside, make sure they're going to sleep, but they still need to be fed. Oh, and they all need to be fertilized. So go to a garden center where they know about plants and tell them what you've got, and they'll tell you exactly what fertilizer to buy, and the instructions are on the box, and it's easy to do. You just mix a little bit of it with water, and when you're watering them, they get fertilized. You don't have to fertilize them that much. Get yourself a house plant, and the world will be around a lot longer.